We'll begin with you, of course, sir. With over 10,000 strikes by the US, massive degradation of Iran's capabilities, would you say that Washington's military objectives have largely been achieved, or is this still an open-ended conflict? Because, of course, the US president was also talking to his cabinet just a few moments back, and he was highlighting that this conflict is going to take much longer than expected, a couple of weeks.
Thank you, Umar Saab. Thank you for highlighting this very fundamental question. You know, it's been the fourth week of the war, almost a month, and the world couldn't have imagined that a war of this intensity would continue that long. The global economy is on the verge of, being a strange hold. But responding to your question directly, U.S. I think is nowhere closer to achieving its politico-military objectives. You know, militarily they have caused a lot of destruction. They've destroyed the Navy, but their political objectives, are nowhere close to achievement. Especially, the regime change. The regime is already there. The faces have changed, but Iran is, continuing the same policy of achieving its national interest, the articulated aims of the continuing with its stance with the Middle East, and I think the US has to do a major rethink, and that's why you see this offer of negotiations has come up. I think both sides feel the pain, and it is a common desire that a ceasefire or a modicum of semblance should
come. But
even
when you look at what Trump has just said in his first address since this whole war began with Iran, and also by the comments that are coming from the IRGC or others, it seems that there's a certain hard line that is being put forward. But we don't know, maybe back-channel diplomacy is the way forward, this is the way things are going to move forward. Mohsen, coming to you. Given Iran's ability to still fin checkpoints, choke points or checkpoints like the Strait of Hormuz, for example, and Bab al-Mandeb, has deterrence actually failed in your point of view?
No, I think Iran is very successful in articulating its strategy and manifesting its strategy. It has complete hold on the Straits of Hormuz, the trade. I think it is a masterstroke of Iran that it has allowed trade to flow, albeit at a trickle. But the oil going towards China in the Iranian ships, and similarly the selected countries have been allowed. And in fact, Iran has very clearly said that except for the ships of the Iran or Israel or the countries that are supporting their war effort, all the ships of the other countries are free to go, and they have in fact improvised an alternate navigation route which flows through their territorial waters. And there are talks which are unverified at this moment that they are claiming some transit fee or something, like they are accepting payments in yuan or all that. But I think that Iran has very successfully manifested its strategy of holding Hormuz.
All right, if you say so. But that's, of course, something that needs to be considered as well. Mohsen, Jaipal Saab, how do you assess the risk of an escalation into a wider regional war as far as this conflict is concerned? Because there are already a lot of question marks around that, especially with the Gulf states already intercepting drones and missiles, not since now, but since the last couple of days.
Yes, the risk of escalation is very, very real, I must say, given the stakes involved. We saw the targeting of the South Pars field and the Ras Laffan gas field. These are the strategic assets of a country. If you chokehold the economic lifeline of a country, and similarly the Gulf states' anxiety is very much obvious. Because they are between a rock and a hard place. Because they were expecting that their sovereignty will be protected by a security umbrella, which is not. So they are also walking a very tight rope, and any miscalculation or any mistargeting or any false flag operations which have been witnessed since the day one of the war, there is a serious risk of conflagration into a global war or a major regional war.
Okay, that's your take. Mohsen, all right. Rear Admiral Saab, coming to you. This quoted pause or slow down as far as the strikes, does it signal some kind of a strategic recalibration in this war from both sides or from one side, or is this operational fatigue, or is this both?
I think it's a deliberate pause, once, to give option to Iran that the demands that were put by the US, that Iran shows some flexibility to it. But I think my take is that if you can't gain an advantage on the battlefield, it is futile to seek it on the negotiation table. And it is very evident that United States have not succeeded so far in its objectives. And, seeking those objectives at the negotiation table, I think that also reflects the weakness or the frustration in the U.S. cabinet as well. Because these negotiations do not come from a position of strength, rather not from a position of strength, but a position of weakness or a position of a compromise.
All right.
Because they also want the war to end completely and in a kind of a win-win situation.
All right. Coming to you, Mohsin. Right. All right, Adam. Rear Admiral Saab, if negotiations are underway, and of course a lot of reports suggest they are, does that indicate limits of military power in achieving political outcomes?
I think the military and the politics go hand in hand. There's a famous statement of Clausewitz that politics is the continuation of war by other means, and war is continuation of politics by other means. So I think what you cannot achieve militarily, because the kinetic instrument has a limit. It can give you conditions in which the political instrument or the diplomatic instrument should then take on and build. So I think it's not a kind of a, either or, because even at the peak of the war, the diplomatic lines are open, the back channels are operative, and we are witnessing the same thing. And as my fellow panelist has highlighted, the role of Pakistan is very important, because it enjoys a semblance of trust with all stakeholders, in this conflict, barring, of course, Israel.
That I agree with that. Mohsin, Admiral Saab, Jaishankar's use of crude, non-parliamentary language, does this not reflect a deeper diplomatic frustration, especially when India finds itself completely sidelined in this US-Israel-Iran crisis?
Of course it does, and I think we must look at the roots of these remarks, where they have sprung from. They've sprung from hatred and a lack of acceptance of Pakistan as a reality since 1947. We have seen Indian efforts to dismantle this idea, to dislodge us, to break Pakistan. But Pakistan is one factor, but another factor is their betrayal by the US, because they feel betrayed, because they've been propped up as a counterweight to the China and what bashing they received in the Mark-i-Haq. And, it was very clear to the US that India will not fight.
All right. I'll get back to you on that, but we wanted to show our audience joined us. Coming to you, Rear Admiral Saab, talking about Jaishankar's use of non-parliamentary language, I just wanted to interject and add what Stephen Witkoff also had to say. These go side by side. At one place, India is using unparliamentary language. At the other, on the other side, it's also extremely isolated, and Pakistan takes the front stage. How do you see all of this situation evolving, and how do you see Pakistan's role evolving as well in this context?
Yes, I would continue with my remarks on the Jaishankar statement, unbecoming and uncouth remarks, And as I said, that these remarks are born out of hatred of Pakistan, and the hate is the last refuge of the incompetent, the insecure, and a fearful person. And all these things are very evident in today's India's foreign policy. Their strategic autonomy, or I would say the mirage of strategic autonomy that they've been, showing the world, has been blown apart. The way they have flip-flopped with their relationship with former Soviet Union, now Russia, and now the United States. How they have ditched Iran, which was being, claimed as a strategic partner and for connectivity. I think India has been dumped. They think that they've been dumped by the US as a cheap date, because they will not rise to the occasion when the chips are down with China. So that's a kind of insecurity, because the Middle East is going to be, there's going to be a great reset, and India finds that it will have no iota of any role in the Middle East if Pakistan succeeds as a lead negotiator or a mediator. And I would respectfully disagree with a remark by Adam that Pakistan is not a go-between. That today, this moment reminds me of an important remarks by Quaid-e-Azam, the founder of Pakistan. In 1948, when he was giving interview to an American magazine, Life, he said, and he was questioned on Pakistan's foreign policy, and he said that America needs Pakistan more than Pakistan needs America. And he said that Pakistan is the pivot of the world, placed on the frontier on which the future position of the world revolves. And today we are witnessing the same. And we witnessed to some extent in 1969 also, when Pakistan acted as a bridge between the United States and China, and
True. That was a very important role that Pakistan played at that time as well.
Exactly.
All right. We've also been joined by Narendra Modi's visible alignment with Israel. He was there just a few weeks back, right a few days before this whole thing escalated, this conflict escalated, and also when the whole conflict with Afghanistan also escalated from the Afghan side as well. This visible alignment with Israel, has that effectively, in your point of view, disqualified India from playing any neutral or credible role as far as Middle Eastern diplomacy is concerned?
This too, and other things as well. I think this was the fundamental factor that India has been a staunch ally of Israel. We have seen that since last many decades, and especially its aim was to get latest arms for fight against Pakistan, and their suppression of the freedom struggle in Kashmir. They've been taking a lot of help from Israel, the weapons as well as the tactics that the Israel has been using against Palestinians inside Gaza and the West Bank. So this was very obvious that India is not a neutral player in this conflict, and especially their ditching of the Iran recently, their eviction from the port of Chabahar, their eviction from the Iran-Pakistan-India pipeline, a decade ago. So that means that India could not be trusted by at least Iran as a reliable partner. That's why it has not been considered. There was a voice a few days ago coming from the Finland that India should be involved in the maritime security architecture to open the Hormuz, but that was a faint voice, and probably that was something which might be planted as well.
Interesting perspective, could be planted as well. Another story that is making the question to you, Rear Admiral Saab, how can a democracy like India justify stripping citizens of constitutional protections simply for exercising their freedom of religion? We're short of time. I'd like a short answer if that's possible.
I think this drives from their Hindutva policy, because they want everyone to toe the same Hindu line, and they want to prevent conversions because of their historic treatment of the minorities. There is a strong sentiment, among the lower caste people to convert to Islam, which are more egalitarian religion and more egalitarian values. So I think it's a state measure to stop those conversions.
All right, but to what end is the question that we'd like to ask the world in particular. With that, ladies and gentlemen, we come to an end of this show. Thank you very much, Rear Admiral Javed Iqbal Saab, to have been there with us throughout the show. It was not intended at the beginning, but you were so gracious enough to stay and answer all the questions that we did ask you during the course of the show. That brings us to the end of this week's Beyond Borders. As usual, we've talked about issues that are extremely pertinent, important to this world, and we've given you different perspectives, and we'd like you to make your informed decision based on the facts, figures, and points of views that we've highlighted, and we'll continue to highlight that in the shows to come. We'll see you inshallah Monday with new stories, perspectives, and points of views. Till then, have a great end of the week. Allah Hafiz.